So the first house, like the first real house that I remember, actually I say real house, but it was probably a townhouse now that I think about it, because I remember the houses being pretty close together and they weren't very big. But the first real house I remember was in an area called Green Run in, it might have been in Virginia, no, I think it was in Chesapeake. Again, we're still in Hampton Roads, but it's like the city next to Virginia Beach, which is very large in land size, but it's kind of a shithole. Maybe it is in Virginia Beach. I don't fucking remember. I don't remember exactly where Green Run is, but it's like a really ghetto neighborhood. Like one of the most ghetto neighborhoods in that, like in the Virginia Beach vicinity, because Virginia Beach is a very nice city and there's not a lot of ghetto areas, and even the ones that are not that ghetto. But Green Run is one of the more ghetto neighborhoods. And it was, again, me, Victor, my parents, all lived there, and it was while we lived there that my dad got into the car business, because up until this point, my parents had both been, like, they were both really hard workers, and my dad had been in the Navy when I was a little kid. I want to say he had already been in the Navy for, like, 4 years when my parents met, because he was in the Navy for 6 years total. And he joined when he was 18. Like, the second he turned 18, he dropped out of school and joined the Navy. And I know he was in for 6 years. So, yeah, I think I was 2 when he left the Navy. But after that, him and my mom were always working as managers at various places. Like, like, my dad's, they're both incredibly hard workers. My mom has had, like, every job in the world. Like, she's worked every fucking retail and service industry, like, basic job that you possibly could. But they always end up being managers wherever they work. So, they were both working at a place called Picasso Moon. And it was, like, two different stores, but they were the managers of both. Like, each of them was a manager of a different Picasso Moon, I think. And it was basically like a psychedelic shop. Like they sold all kinds of like cool tie-dye merchandise and shit. Like this early 90s. So like basically it was the 90s aesthetic store. Although there was also like some element of throwback to like 70s and 60s psychedelic shit. But like everything was like trippy and tie-dye and druggy in these stores. I remember thinking they were pretty cool as a kid. I can, like, pretty vividly remember what Picasso Moon looked like. Not a kind of store there's a lot of anymore. But, yeah, so they both worked at those, and I guess they really hated the owner, like, and they eventually left. And then my dad joined the car business, and that happened while we were living in Green Run. And he became a car salesman, because the thing about selling cars is that you don't need a degree to do it. All you need is charisma. That is what the appeal is of the car business, is that you can make it in the car business on no basis other than you are charismatic and hardworking enough to sell cars to people. And my dad is extremely charismatic, and he's got a way with words, with explaining shit to people, with rambling. He's not unlike myself, a very rambling man. So, yeah, he got into the car business and quickly started succeeding there. Now, I remember that in this house, this is where I kind of made my first, like, friends. Because when you move constantly, you never make friends. And I think this is why I grew up to be such an awkward dude. And, you know, just, like, never understood the people around me. Never really knew what was going on, you know, in my surroundings. Like, I never understood other people. And I really didn't until I started this job. Like, until I put myself in a position where I'm constantly interacting with other people, just by way of my work. Like, I never really understood people or what everybody was thinking. I still kind of don't. I still need help a lot of the time. I'll tell a fun story later about May and I going to the mall the other day and me having her rank stores for me. But anyways. So, yeah, I was, as a kid, never had really any friends. And this is also where I started to develop, like, real passions. Because, like, I was always an obsessive. Like, this has always been the way I am. I get into something really intensely for as long as it holds my attention. And I remember, you know, as a really little kid, I was way into, like, Barney and fucking Sesame Street. And I had a Sega Pico, and I was into that. I remember that when I was 3 or so, I was really into Power Rangers. And I think that carried over into this house, into the Green Run house. I was really into Power Rangers. I started school in this house. I started kindergarten, so I would have been 5 at this point. And I started watching Beast Wars. I was really fucking into Beast Wars, which was, you know, the CG Transformers spinoff that ran in the 90s. That I was, it's pretty great, and I was a huge fucking fan. This is also, I want to say, not long before my parents got a computer. I don't remember if it was in that house or the next one. My parents were weirdly early adopters of computer technology. Like, we had a computer and the internet from when I was really young, and I want to say it's just because the way my dad is, the way he was growing up, is he would spend to exactly how much money he has. My dad was never good at saving money. He was never good at spending responsibly. He would put lots of stuff on credit, rack up debts, you know. He had a shitload of debt that he had to pay off later in life. And I didn't know all that as a kid, but like he spoiled us. You know, he would buy me whatever toys I wanted. He would buy me and Victor all kinds of shit. He would always try to like own the nicest things he could, kind of. And so I think he bought a computer at such an early point because, like, you know, people were hyping up computers and he wanted to be in on that. But he never really used it. Like, my dad didn't get into using computers until, like, the late 2000s. He certainly was not on the internet, like, at all. I mean, he used computers for work, obviously, but, like, he did not... It wasn't really until Facebook that he figured out the internet. And my mom was more like, she figured it out with like forums in the early 2000s, but for me, I was on the internet from the fucking 90s, and I remember that I would somehow find Beast Wars screenshots and I would print them out, and they were like thumbnail size, like these little like 200 pixel Beast Wars thumbnails from the show, and I would print them out for some reason just to have them. And then, yeah, a couple years later when Pokemon came around, I really became into the internet because of that. But yeah, so I remember being really into Beast Wars, and I also remember making my first friends, which were a couple of kids named Tyler and Spencer. Tyler was a little bit older than me, and he was like an unhinged brat. Like, he was the epitome of the ADHD kid, like the kid who would have been given Ritalin at that time. I don't know if he ever did. I don't know if his mom just couldn't afford it. His mom was like a kind of a like cool stoner chick, like very young acting. She was friends with my mom. Like, so our moms were friends, and that was part of why we hung out. But like, I just remember that kid's mom being like really exasperated with him all the time. And then she had her second son, Spencer, who was a bit younger than me, closer to Victor's age. And they were very clearly from different fathers, because Tyler was as pale and white as they can get, and Spencer was a, like, Mexican kid. So, but they were both her kids. And, Spencer was more, like, quiet and reserved. Tyler was, like, a loud, audacious brat. But me and Victor hung out with them just because a lot of the friends that me and Victor had were like other pairs of brothers with a relatively similar age difference, you know, in the early part of my life. But yeah, so we had these two, and I don't know if we were ever that close. Like, we hung out a bit, but like, I don't know. I think Tyler was a little bit too old to find me interesting, and Spencer was a little bit too old to find Victor interesting, and I was a little bit too old to find Spencer interesting. So, like, we were never, like, close, but we hung out, played on playgrounds and shit occasionally. I very vaguely remember any of this. You know, we're talking about my early fucking childhood. I'm, like, 5 years old. So, this is 21 years ago. And, yeah, but I do remember that, and granted, I have an incredible memory, so, like, the fact that I can even pull this much out is only because I am someone who has an insane memory, and I recheck my memories a lot. You know, I'm somebody who thinks back on my life a lot, and, like, keeps these things in mind. And I'll be glad to have this all recorded in podcasts before I forget too much. You know, like I've never been big into taking pictures. I've never been big into like, you know, like preserving the actuality of what happened so much as my memory of what happened. But I like to every once in a while like get my memories on recording so I can compare notes, and like whatever the earliest one is the most trustworthy. Like these memories I'm saying right now might not be that trustworthy, but they will be more so than if I did this 5 years from now, you know. So it's good to have these things on recording. But yeah, I remember that I was really into Green Day's Dookie at the time, because I knew Green Day as the band that had babysat me during Lollapalooza. Like, my parents, you know, had made a lot of to-do about that, and Dookie had come out around that time. And, yeah, I remember that Basket Case was my favorite song at the time. I remember that we listened to that and, like, R.E.M. We listened to a lot of the song Losing My Religion and not really anything else on the album. But those CDs got stolen because, like, our next door neighbor was some, like, drug addict dude who, like, I think my mom had, like, loaned him some CDs and he, like, pawned them for drug money or something like that. We'd had some shit stolen from our house as well. Like, again, this was a fucking ghetto, you know, and, like, the people around us were really ghetto. And my parents would throw these, like, huge-ass parties. We had this dude living with us named Lonnie, who was, like, just some stoner guy, like, some long-haired, stoned-out dude who was living in our house. I don't even remember how my parents knew him. But, they would throw these big parties, and, like, you know, everybody shows up, gets drunk and high. And they kind of stopped doing that because of the fact that one time they found, like, cocaine on the toilet seat and, like, or like, a heroin needle. Like, they found drug things that should not be around children, basically. They were like, oh, we can't keep throwing these crazy parties when we've got kids running around and these people are doing coke in our house. You know, like, this is too much. I also remember having a babysitter at the time who was, like, some 15-year-old my parents would hire to watch us. And I mean, she would just kind of sit around and watch TV because we were really well-mannered kids, so we didn't do shit. But yeah, like, I remember that, and I remember that in my perspective, she was, like, an adult, but, like, thinking about it now, she was just some fucking kid, you know? Like, it's really funny to think about stuff like that. But, yeah, I remember that I had a costume party for my birthday that was superhero themed. I wasn't even that big into superheroes. Like, I kind of liked DC heroes because I'd seen Super Friends on TV a couple times, and I had this blanket of, like, the Super Friends. And so I thought they were kind of cool, and I think I just, like, wanted to get more into them. And I remember my mom made a Superman cake, and I think I was dressed as Batman, and, like, basically all the kids came in, like, Halloween costumes. Like, my mom's always been big into theme parties, so I remember that there was a theme party of superheroes. And, I also think this is the house where my dad got what we called the color car for the first time, because my dad would always drive demos, like, and he worked for a Volkswagen dealership at the time, so he would drive, like, demos of the new Beetle that they had just put out, the 2000 Beetle, or, no, the 90s Beetle. There was a new Beetle in the 90s, I think, and there was one version of it that was, like, every part of the car was a different color, like all primary colors. Very tacky looking car, but we absolutely loved it. We thought it was the coolest shit in the world. The fucking color car. And I want to say that's, like, all my memories of that house. I just remember lots of Beast Wars and Power Rangers. You know, Tyler and Spencer. And I remember that what finally drove us to move out was gunshot noises. Like, one time, my parents were woken up in the dead of night by gunshot sounds, and they were like, we need to get the fuck out of here. And I believe, because up until that house, me and Victor, like, shared a bed with our parents. Like, we would sleep in our parents' bed, which, thinking about it now, I can't believe my parents were able to put up with that, you know? Like, I can't imagine sleeping with a child in between me and my girlfriend, my wife, every single night, you know? Oh my god. She won't know this until these start releasing, But by the time this comes out, I think that that May will be my fiance. So, yeah, she doesn't know when I'm planning to drop the question, but it'll be before this podcast comes out. Oh Lord. I can't imagine like us sleeping with a kid between us, you know. But I think in that house might have been when I finally got my first bed. But like I hated sleeping alone. Like I would always come bother my parents, and they would be fucking pissed. And I think it might even be that I remember one night where I kept trying to come into their room, and they kept getting pissed off at me. And I think they were actually just like trying to fuck, and I just didn't understand that and was like interrupting it all night. In retrospect, that's definitely what was happening. But yeah, one night they were woken up by gunshots, and, you know, they were like, we need to get the fuck out of here. Like, this place is too ghetto. My dad was making decent enough money in the car business, you know. So we were like, let's leave the ghetto and move somewhere a little bit nicer. And that'll bring us to the next house.